Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening around the world. This is the e-Spurs podcast, and we have returned for a bumper transfer special.
Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Tottenham.
Joining us on tonight's show, we have one of our stalwarts of the show, Jason McGovern, and last but very much not least, Lyall Thomas from Sky Sports, joining us to discuss everything Tottenham Hotspur in this summer transfer window. You can of course follow us across all the usual social media platforms. We are on Twitter and Instagram at @e_Spurs. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/e-Spurs page. You can also catch us on YouTube, Pinterest and Tumblr, and for all of the links to all e-Spurs platforms, you can head to our website of www.e-Spurs.com. If you like what you hear on the e-Spurs podcast, you can leave us a review. You can do that via iTunes or on YouTube. And just so guys out there, Lyall, can get a bit of a background of what you do, can you just give us just a briefing as to how you kind of cover Spurs in your kind of day-to-day role and your environment and involvement there at Sky Sports?
Yeah, no, I joined Sky about, getting on nearly 4 years ago, and as a journalist, and a journalist with a written background, with a digital media background, and basically I've been involved in the investigations team of reporters since then. So kind of building contacts and investigating what's going on behind the scenes, and Tottenham fell on my radar kind of at the same time. Really, I was working on the London beat since I graduated from university. So the London clubs have kind of been my turf, so to speak, since then. So for a good 7-8 years now, and it just coincided that when I joined Sky, I got to know some people who know what's is going on at Spurs, and so it's kind of developed from there. Really, I've started, but I've been specialising in transfers, especially for quite a long time now. And then we've just gone through a kind of a restructuring at Sky, the way we do things and what we want to do going forward in terms of news gathering and news production, and really want to kind of strengthen our news gathering and be able to bring you guys more news and better news if we can. And so I've got a new role as assistant news editor, so that's going to be doing lots more news gathering and more focused news gathering, but also kind of being part of a team that's going to be able to influence, the editorial direction at Sky and really take it forward and branch it out and try different things. Look to deliver the news in different ways, looking at social media and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to it, and I start next month, and can't wait.
Well, we wish you every success with that role. And Lyall, will that mean for you you'll still be heavily involved in terms of the Spurs side, in terms of transfers? Will that change your role on that from like a day-to-day basis, or are you going to be heavily involved still?
Yeah, absolutely. Wherever my contacts are strongest, and when I'm sure of something, then I'll deliver it. And there's a lot of Spurs stuff that seems to come my way, and that's not going to change. And I'm certainly looking to push harder on my turf and strengthen my ability to deliver the news on the London clubs. So yeah, there's no reason why you won't see even more from me, hopefully.
Coming to you firstly, Jace, I think there's been so much talk out there about Spurs, about doing it early, leaving it late. We're going to come on to Lyall about that very, very shortly. Just want to get your take, Jace, on the constant line we get is that why do Spurs always leave our business in the market late?
Yeah, it's a total myth that we always leave it late. When you look through the current squad, Kevin Wimmer signed in May, Kieran Trippier, Victor Wanyama signed in June, Vertonghen, Alderweireld, Janssen, Ben Davis, Michel Vaughan signed in July, Eric Dyer signed on August the 2nd. And in fact, even the year we brought in all the Gareth Bale money, Soldado signed on the 1st of August, Chadley on the 21st of July, and Paulinho on the 6th of July. So whilst it might seem that we always take it to the end, and Daniel Levy is famous for it, it's actually quite a myth that we're always leaving our business till late.
And what do you make of that, Lyall, just from your perspective, covering Tottenham as a journalist? Are you seeing that?
It's a bit of both, really. I think Tottenham I think they've shown over the last few seasons that when they've identified an area of the team that needs strengthening, something that's actually a weakness, something that Pochettino thinks has hindered them, they've gone out and addressed it straight away. I mean, Jason just used all the examples really there. I can't give any more. You know, when they realised they had a problem defensively, they went out and they got Toby Alderweireld quickly. They got Kieran Trippier quickly. Last year, you know, they really wanted to make sure they got another striker in to support Kane quickly, and they got Janssen in, and so, you know, I think now, you know, the reason we're not seeing any early business at the moment, especially where other clubs are concerned, is because it's other clubs that are trying to catch up to Tottenham, not Tottenham trying to catch up to other clubs. You know, I think you look at Tottenham's squad, and there aren't really any very noticeable weaknesses in the first 11. You know, even the first 13, 14 players, you can't really see any weaknesses there. I mean, you know, you would you look around and think, you know, what could Tottenham do to really improve on that? And I don't see any reason why the players that are in that first 11 aren't going to keep improving next year. So I think Spurs are very relaxed about things at the moment. That's certainly what I'm being told, and I think I would agree that they have every reason to be relaxed. They're in a good situation. You know, all their players are on long contracts. They're not forced into a difficult place with needing to sell anybody. You know, if clubs want to come and get their players, they're going to have to pay big money for them. There's certain players that have been a bit unsettled, that they're in a position where they can move on, but they're not forced into a situation of moving them on for not very much, so they can get good deals. And I think that's why we're not seeing that much happening at the moment. I mean, there's certainly nothing close to happening at the moment. Okay. What I understand to be the case at the moment is they're looking at two positions at the moment. Obviously, the right back situation is something they've got to think about with City's interest in Kyle Walker. So there's a couple of players that they're looking at as potential replacements there. And then I think the other one they want to do is a number 10. And then I think once they've done those, they'll look to move on and see what else, you know, can be done further towards the end of the window, and that obviously depends on outgoings as well, because as I said, there's not any real gaps in the team. You know, I think it's important the Spurs don't, certainly from a bargaining point of view, they don't overload the team with players. I mean, you certainly weaken your negotiating stance when you're looking to move other players on. If you overload your squad, you know, if you look at the centre-back situation, for example, and Kevin Wimmer, who's a little bit unsettled at the moment, is hoping to get more first-team games and is looking, you know, to see whether he can get those elsewhere. Well, I think they're not forced into a difficult situation there, and if they were to bring another player in, it would certainly mean they wouldn't be able to negotiate as much for Kevin if they had, you know, six and a half to choose from.
We're going to go on to individual players shortly, so we will definitely be talking about that number 10 you say, and Kyle Walker at right back. What I want to ask you though, Lyall, is in terms of the stadium, because obviously there's so much talk about who Spurs will move for, the kind of money that they're going to pay, the budget in terms of what Pochettino has to spend. We have got this stadium to pay for, and that is also going to have a dramatic impact in terms of what we can spend this summer.
Yeah, I mean, well, it will have an impact. I don't know about how dramatic that impact is. I mean, it's something that's been impacting them for a number of years now, and something they've, you know, this been the case for a number of years. They're very used to that, and that's how their transfer business has been for, you know, since Pochettino came in. So they're certainly not thrust into a situation they're not familiar with, where they're having to cut down on costs. You know, this is all about budgeting for the next 5 years and or at least the next 2 to 3 years while the stadium's being built. And, you know, obviously we've seen it's an expensive job. You know, it's going to cost, well, it could cost, you know, upwards of 850 million to get this thing done. So, you know, I think Spurs were always aware that cost could potentially rise. I think they always wanted the flexibility for that to be the case as well. And it's something they've got to live with. But I think they've been dealing with it very well. They've brought some great players in for on good deals, you know, for not huge transfer fees or not huge wages. And the team's improved. You've got a record points tally, got highest league finish in the Premier League. I mean, it's all on the up. It's all on the ascendancy. There's nothing on the descendancy at the moment. So I think that's why Spurs can be relaxed, and I'm sure there'll be business, but it just won't necessarily be great big transfer fees for big huge marquee signings or whatever people call them. And
just to cut in there, Lyall, just to make the point, it does seem that Spurs seem to have been planning for that new stadium by this kind of, you know, drive to try and get key players tied down for that new stadium. Just how pivotal do you think has that been for Pochettino, that he has said that to Daniel Levy, that look, these are the players that I want, and in terms of these are the players I want to keep long term? He's made a point of that, hasn't he?
I mean, yeah, it's quite clear to everybody, surely, who those players are. You know, the first 11, pretty much, maybe give or take one, is the team that he wants to take going forward. And you know, you look around around Europe, and you know, Tottenham. It's difficult to improve on that team. You know, that team has got the capacity to keep improving itself. I think it has improved as it's played more together. I mean, you just look at the form of the team towards the end of the year compared to the form in the previous year when they capitulated. You know, this is a team that seems to be able to learn from its mistakes and get better. And there's no reason why it won't keep getting better. So, I think of course that's reflected in new contracts. You know, players' performances and how well they've been doing is what earns them a new contract. You know, they're not necessarily just giving them willy-nilly. So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and what I want to ask you, Lyall, is bringing it on to the actual transfer model that Tottenham are looking towards. If I bring it back to May 2015, Pochettino's words were that he says the club is now looking forward as it embarks on a renewed policy of buying and developing young talent. He says, I do not have the same possibility to spend a lot of money like the managers here 2 seasons ago. We need to be clever in the way that we build the new squad because it is difficult to compete with the money. So he makes a point of saying that. He says we want good players, we want the right profile. We are a team of only 3 players with more than 10 goals each. Harry Kane, Nasser Chadli and Christian Eriksen at that time. And when you bring it to the present day, Lyall, we had Dele Alli, Heung-min Son, Harry Kane with 60 goals between them. He loves to have a team, Lyall, from what we can see, that there's goals spread across the squad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you can see that. And I think they have been clever. You know, the way Pochettino sets up his team is about the sum of all the parts, not the individual parts. So it's about, you know, the tactical roles that he sets out in the team, and whatever player plays in those tactical roles, you know, needs to be able to obey those commands, you know, and once that all adds up, it adds up to a pretty formidable team. I think we've seen that, you know, that they're on their day they're a freight train. So I think they have been clever. I mean, you look at someone like Heung-min Son, for example, who came in under the radar of a lot of people. I mean, I know that Tottenham, one of the first things they did in terms of scouting and have been doing and still do is they look at certain other clubs that operate in a similar way. That will have, you know, a similar philosophy of developing young players and bringing players through the academy. And if you look around Europe, you know, those clubs are quite evident. And one of those clubs is Bayer Leverkusen. But when Heung-min Son came over from Leverkusen, you know, there were other players at Leverkusen you probably might have thought they would go and sign first. You know, people like Calhanoglu, and he's a great example of someone that's coming relatively under the radar and improved over time. And I think he's a real formidable player. I mean, some of the goals he scored last year are fantastic.
Yeah, and like I say, I think, Jason, you've been a big advocate of Heung-min Son, haven't you, in terms of the way he came into Spurs. Didn't have a great first season, but second season really improved as a player.
Yeah, and that's what you want those players to do, to come in and have the impact. And, you know, it was testimony that he became such an integral part of the side. And just thinking of speculation on Heung-min Son, if I remember rightly, that transfer window, I don't remember reading too many links to him.
Right.
I think that was one that did fly under the radar. And I'm always suspicious when you have a player linked for about 6 weeks and then suddenly we go and sign a player that hardly anyone's mentioned. So it just shows you, just because you haven't got a name rammed down your throat all day, it doesn't mean to say that things aren't going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and what I want to ask you on that, Lyall, is that we seem to have now, under Pochettino, I don't know if you've noticed it as well, being in your position as a journalist, that there seems more of a smaller pool now of players that we're being linked with. Normally, previous summers, there seems to be hundreds and thousands of players. It seems like that list, Lyall, is getting shorter. Are you noticing that from your end of the club being a bit more private about their business?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're as private as they can be, and I think a part of it is because Tottenham's recruitment now is less agent-based. So it used to be very heavily agent-based. So it, you know, there was. I mean, you remember Damien Comolli talking about Tottenham having a very limited scouting structure for a long time. After he was there, and they were known for that. So when things are more agent-based, and you're asking agents to bring you possible deals, you're asking agents their opinion on players, you're asking them to go out and find you players, rather than asking scouts to do that. You know, you're obviously giving your information to a bigger group of people, you know, and agents, it's in their interests for the names of their players to be out there in the public domain, because, you know, it helps them drum up interest in their players. So I think that might have been one of the reasons why you saw more names in the media, is because more agents knew what Tottenham were doing than they do now. And I think what Tottenham have done is reduce the number of people that know what's going on, certainly inside those four walls. I mean, unless you're really inside that room with them, then nobody truly knows every fine detail of what goes on. And I think that the broader number of people that know what they intend to do is not as big as it used to be. So that's probably one reason why. I think Spurs are obviously used to be a club that would change their players. There would be quite a significant turnover at Tottenham in summers gone by. Generally, you'd see probably 4 or 5 come and go, and I think if you're an agent and you see Tottenham as a buying club, you're probably more likely to mention Tottenham along with your player, especially if they've had a look at him. If you've had a conversation somewhere down the line, so they're more likely to tell a journalist, they're interested in him. And again, I mean, we could spend all night talking about the nuances of transfers and also transfer language. I mean, interest is a word that has so many different meanings, because you could scout a player for the course of the year, and you might be telling an agent that you're interested, but are you actually interested in doing a deal for that player? Well, you might not be yet. So it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one to manage, and what I try to do is just let other people do the speculating, and let other publications and what have you. There's enough names out there that get mentioned without me adding more to them. I think I try and get interested when something's going to happen. When an actual deal is going to be done, and when there's going to be some talks between the clubs, and once some firm decisions have been made on who they want to go for, then if I hear about that, then that's when I'm going to get interested.
Okay, I hate to say it, Lyall, we're going to probably throw some names at you later. I do apologise in advance, because
that's right. No problem.
Lyall, just bringing it onto the academy, what have you made about Pochettino's investment in youth? I bring you back to 2015. We've seen the likes of, back in the day, we've seen Mason, Josh Onomar, Harry Winks, most recently Lesniak, Shusha, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Edwards, Amos, Miller and Sterling. I mean, there does seem to be this kind of real trust in that youth will still be his answer. It won't just be about flashing the cash. Is that what Levy loves about Pochettino, do you think? Not just only because he doesn't want to have, a chest, full of money. He can actually develop and train.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that was one of the reasons why they brought him in. I think Pochettino's the reputation that precedes him before he came to Spurs was one of developing young players. That's obviously what he really enjoys doing, what he thrives on, and what he did at Southampton, even what he did at Espanyol. So, when you're deciding on what the future of your club's going to be, and which kind of a manager and a head coach you want to fit that, then the Pochettino definitely fit the idea of developing the academy players and bringing them through, and he had a track record of doing that. So, yeah, obviously, there's countless names we could talk about.
Of course, yeah.
Since he's a rival, even players not necessarily at the club anymore, like Ryan Mason, you mentioned, people like that, gone on to great things. And I mean, I know Nabil Bentaleb was somebody they didn't want in the end, and was someone who was actually obviously given his debut by Sherwood, but Bentaleb's been one of the highest performing players in that position in Germany this year for Schalke. And
he'll go for a huge fee, won't he, Lyall, as well? This summer, as we expect, he will go for a pretty big fee. Yeah,
that's already been set in. I think that comes into effect at the 1st of July. His contract there will start, and Spurs will get a transfer fee. I think it's about 17, 18 million, something like that. I think somewhere around that mark. It's a good deal for a player who's, I mean, like you said, from Daniels and the club's point of view, there's somebody you've invested in your academy and you brought through, and you can sell on for that price, and it's good business. And I think it's every club's dream who invests a lot of money in academies to bring through their players. I mean, it's for a lot of clubs, having an academy is expensive business, and there's not actually that many players that come through in the end. And I know a lot of clubs are talking about ditching their academies for that reason. I mean, and Brentford did exactly that a year ago. They realised that it just didn't even make any financial sense to have an academy anymore, so they went for the B team instead. And we might see a few more clubs do that. I don't think Tottenham will do that, but we might see a few more. And so, yeah, I mean, going back to that, it's obviously been Tottenham's policy to do that, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Certainly not.
Just a couple there. I mean, the important thing with the talented youngsters is they got to have a pathway to come through. And, you know, everyone talks about Marcus Edwards, and we want to see Marcus Edwards, and we want to see Marcus Edwards. But there's got to be a role in the team for him to come into. And if you go and buy 3 or 4 attacking players like everyone wants us to do this summer, then where the hell is the role for Marcus Edwards? And a player like that will eventually leave, and then, you know, you've bought a player in for 25, 30 million, and you're selling one that you had there that was sitting there you could have used, and you're selling him for 10 million, and 2 years later he's being sold for 30 million. So you got to be careful with that. And just the other quickly mention there on Ryan Mason, wasn't it fantastic to see him back in training this week at Hull, and you know that recovery is great to see. Yeah,
completely agree. And Lyall, just to bring up Jason's point there, just on the Marcus Edwards of this world, is he a player that next season he may get more of a look in the first team for you?
I mean, I don't know what the plan is with Marcus Edwards. I mean, I don't know exactly where he's at. I know he's recovered from his injury now, so he should be in a position to come. I mean, listen, he's been training with the first team for the best part of 18 months, maybe even 2 years. You know, on and off to begin with, and then more regularly after that. And so I would expect him to come straight in and train with the first team, with a number of other youngsters. And then, you know, that's when decisions are made. You know, it's a real refreshing point, I think, for most players, if not all players, when they come back for pre-season. There's a bit of a reset button that's made, you know, obviously without ignoring what's happened in the season before, but players have a bit of a chance to prove themselves again. I mean, you know, during the season it's very difficult for players who are not in the picture, not in the scene so much, that need developing like Marcus to really make an impact, prove themselves. You know, they get that chance obviously in some cup games when players are rested, but you know, it's difficult. Whereas pre-season is the time when you can really assess a player properly and really, you know, iron out some bad habits and push him on a bit. So I'm sure that's something that will develop a bit more as the summer goes on. But what the actual plan is for him at the moment, I don't know, and I'm not sure there'll be a firm decision on that yet. Okay,
well, we most certainly keep a close eye on it, Lyall. And we've got a couple of questions around the youth team. I don't know if you can kind of give us any answers on these. We've got Sem at THFC Ozark, who asked the question, has the Under-20 World Cup and the emergence of Onomah as the centre mid changed our mind about signing a central midfielder? Also, Winks being back as well offers plenty of competition for that kind of central midfield role. What do you think, Lyall? Was it a bit too early for that? I mean, I suppose Pochettino has seen him, I think, like you've alluded to previously, you know, kind of week in, week out.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything new that Pochettino could learn about Onomah from a few England youth games from afar. You know, he'll know exactly what Josh Onomah was capable of, and what position he sees him playing in. I mean, Josh came through the academy as a number 10, so he's always been very much a central player. You know, that he came through, he was the 10 and Winks was the 4, and there was an opportunity for him to get into the team if he shifted to a wide area, and he's obviously got some attributes that work with playing from a wide area, but I don't think it was his natural position, so that might be one reason why we didn't necessarily see the best of him. But whether he has a chance, you know, coming through this year, again, that's something that, you know, he'll be able to. He'll obviously have the chance to prove in pre-season. But whether that will change Tottenham's mind in terms of buying a new number 10, I don't think so. I think that's the one position that they've looked at, and they think they need another option there. You know, somebody brings something different. You know, the one they want is Ross Barkley at the moment. So again, you know, like Marcus Edwards, I think Onomah, of course, he'll have a chance, but there's something that will become a bit clearer towards the start of the season, I think.
Okay, and Jace, your reaction on that from Lyall there about Ross Barkley, a player you like?
Yeah, I do like Barkley. I understand the inconsistency in him. I understand people say his decision making is poor and he's tactically naive and things. But I think Pochettino's the type of player that will get the best out of Ross Barkley, and I think it's a move that suits everyone. I think, you know, Barkley will have noticed how many English players have debuted for under Pochettino for England. He'll see himself not even in the England squad at the moment. He'll have seen, you know, look at Kieran Trippier, for instance, gone straight into there. So I think in a World Cup year, Barkley knows he wants to be in and around that England squad, and you've only got 3 or 4 squads, you know, that are named before it is. So I think Barkley wants that sorted this year rather than going to the end of his contract, and I think it's a natural move. And I do think he's a player. I know everyone says, will he get in our first team? But let's remember Dele Alli's going to miss 4 European games, and you've got to allow for a player being injured. And we got lucky last year with Ali and Eriksson not getting too many injury problems. So I think he's definitely a player that's good enough to be in our squad. And if you compare Ross Barkley to Moussa Sissoko, it's a no-brainer.
It's definitely an upgrade there. I mean, I've got to say about the points that we point out about Barkley, he seems to be everything of a player that Pochettino would love to get his hands on. A little bit of, indecisiveness in terms of decision making, tactically questionable. We've seen Pochettino do so well with fullbacks in terms of getting them up to speed about where they should be, getting them back in England squads. In terms of that, Lyall, it kind of ticks the right boxes in terms of a player that would really develop under Pochettino. The question will be, Lyall, is just when will Tottenham make their move? Is this going to be one of those typical Tottenham transfers that will tick down to the last day, in which Spurs, you would think, get their best price for the player because the value of him is diminishing day by day?
Yeah, I think that is something that will play out, definitely. I mean, they want him, and Everton know they want him, and Barkley knows they want him, but not at 50 million at the moment. So it's early in the summer, and Everton can quote that sort of price because time's on their side at the moment. But like you said, day by day, the minutes tick away, and we get further towards the deadline, and they've got a player that they know doesn't want to be there anymore. So we certainly expect that price to come down. But I think Spurs, there are some other players that they'll be looking at, and if a better deal comes along, or another player they think could be as good or better comes along, then they might shift course. But I know at the moment Barkley is the one that they're looking at, and is the one they want to do. So it'd be interesting to see how that one plays out over the next month or so.
Just quickly on the fee for him, of course, some of it may well depend if they shift Lukaku on, because if somebody does go and pay 60, 70, 80 million quid for Lukaku, then Everton don't quite have the need to bring in the money for Ross Barkley, so they can be prepared to sit out and say, no, we'll get the price that we want, rather than trying to do a rush sale for him.
Like you said, there's lots of boxes that get ticked there. There's Barkley's he's a good lad as well. Yeah, from what I've been told, he's got a good head on his shoulders and a good attitude, and that's what Pochettino likes to get. So when you can assure yourself that you're getting a player of that much potential, and he's got a good attitude, he wants to, that you're a club that he would like to play for. It's it can be difficult to get a lot of options that tick all those boxes.
Yeah.
So that'll be why they're looking at him at the moment.
Okay, and we've got a question here, Lyall, from TMD Sport. Do we know Pochettino's real feelings on getting players late in the window versus his own plans?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for him, obviously, but I know any head coach would want his players in as early as possible to work with him in pre-season. It goes back to what we were saying before about the youngsters. The pre-season is really when you get all the work, or most of the work done. Especially with a new player, in terms of drilling him in tactically and how you want him to play. When you get into the nitty-gritty of the season and the frequent fixtures, and so much of it now is all about recovery. There's less time to be able to develop players and really get into them. I think we saw that problem with Guardiola at City last year. They realised they had some problems and they didn't really have the time to iron them out. So I think like any head coach, I'm sure he'd want to get his players in early, but he's certainly not somebody who's naive about the transfer window. He knows how it works. He's been around, so I'm sure there's certainly no friction there that I know of anyway.
Okay, fair enough. And as we've last spoke to you, Lyall, we discussed about Paul Mitchell was on gardening leave. Obviously, we've had Steve Hitchen come in, the chief scout. What have you made of the relationship there between him and Pochettino? Has it been a good one so far? What can you tell us on Mitchell departing and Hitchen coming in?
Yeah, from what I've been told, it's good. Actually, I spoke to somebody last week actually that said that it's working quite well, and he's doing well, Steve. I mean, again, I can't speak on his behalf. Just tell you what I understand to be the case is that things are going well within the transfer committee, and they're relaxed about what they're doing. They've got their ideas of what they want to do. I mean, obviously, I think the relationship between Steve and Pochettino is something that is new and will have to develop. Steve obviously worked at the club before years ago, and has obviously known Daniel for a long time, and we'll know how the chairman operates and from that side of things. And also, he will have known a few of the other scouts that were there before. He was obviously working at Derby with Rob McKenzie, who was at Tottenham before. Very much the scouting scene. They all know each other and see each other a lot. And so I'm sure he'll have been given a lot of information about what Tottenham are trying to achieve and what his role is going to be. And I mean, he's got a big job on his hands. He really has. I think for somebody who has never had a chief scout role before, a big club, he's got a big challenge. but I'm sure it's a challenge that he'll be really relishing. I think anybody would in that situation, wouldn't they? If you were given the chief scout role at a club, I think it would be something that anybody would want to get their teeth into. And he's worked for big clubs before. He's worked for Liverpool, and I know he's an expert on the French market, especially. I know he lived in France for a long time, and he's very much. I think he's very much continental based and spends a lot of time on the continent. So,
does he have a preferred market to work in terms of a special kind of is he an operator in Spanish, French market? Is there a preferred market he tends to work in?
Yeah, I think they're looking at. I'm not aware of any players that they're looking for outside of, say, the top 5-6 leagues. They're obviously looking at players in the Portuguese Primera and in La Liga, in the Bundesliga, in Serie A and Liga. But I know he's spent a lot of time in France, and his connections are certainly very good in France. I know that much.
Does he know Thomas Lemar's phone number, Lyall?
I'm sure every supporter would love to think that was the case.
What can you tell us on him, Lyall? Because there's been a lot of speculation about Thomas Lemar. I think more from bookies than actual credible journalists out there. Is he a player of interest to Spurs? Let me put it to you like that.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to what I was saying about the kind of nuances of language in transfers and what does interest mean. Well, I mean, from a starting point, yeah, of course, Thomas Lemar is somebody that Spurs would want, someone that they like. I mean, he's definitely a talent. He's a young talent. He fits the profile of that kind of a versatile attacking player. That can play off the right or the left or even through the middle, and he ticks a lot of boxes in terms of the player that he is. But then when you're assessing a player and what you want, and you get to that point, and what's the next thing that you look at? Well, you look at what the deal's going to look like, don't you? You look at what he's going to cost, and you look at whether it's something that can be achieved, whether the selling club is perhaps in a position where they want to sell him. And that's where I see the difficulty for Spurs. I mean, I don't want to put people's hopes down. Monaco are not going to disband their whole team, and they've already sold Bernardo Silva to Man City. They're probably going to sell Kylian Mbappe to somewhere. They're probably going to sell Benjamin Mendy as well. So, and they're looking at recouping around 200 million euros from those 3 players. And so you think from a selling point of view, they don't need to sell any more players than that from a financial standpoint, and also they did very well last year. So disbanding, it'll be like Tottenham disbanding their team now. You wouldn't. They're very similar to Tottenham in a lot of ways. I think Monaco in France, in terms of the stature that they're at. Obviously they won the French league last year, but they're a young team developing younger players, looking for getting cheaper deals and bringing players on. And if you were to reverse the teams and swap them around and suddenly talk about Tottenham disbanding half their team and Monaco coming for every player that they've got, you'd be saying no way. So
yeah, of course, yeah, it's an interesting one.
Also there's the fact that Thomas Lemar is of interest to a lot of clubs, a lot of top clubs, and if he was to become available and Monaco were to indicate that they're prepared to negotiate a deal for him, I think there's a lot of clubs that would come and try and negotiate, and that's only going to drive up the price really to a point where the Spurs aren't prepared to compete with currently, for a variety of reasons. Obviously, with the new stadium, as we've already touched on. So there's just too many difficulties there with that one, and I wouldn't get one's hopes up on that. But
okay, no, we really do appreciate your honesty on that, Lyall. And before we go to a break to touch upon individual players, what I do want to ask you about, as you've mentioned there, is just the kind of wages, the fee maybe it would command, and just generally the wage structure overall at Tottenham. I mean, as we understand it, Toby Alderweireld wants 100k a week. This is what we read in the papers. He wants 100k a week. We've got Harry Kane, Hugo Lloris up there as our main earners. In terms of Toby, what's your current understanding of the situation? Has he been offered an extension to date?
No, I understand he hasn't been made an offer yet. I mean, there's been talks about it. I mean, when you negotiate a new contract, you talk about it first, and then you make an offer. You obviously don't come into it blind or fresh without actually having some discussions first. So there's been talks. There's been talks for a while. I think I reported back in December that they were going to start talking about it, and I think they did. I think he was injured at the time, and they were waiting for him to just settle back into the team. You have to think about when the time is right. I think when you're negotiating with a new contract with the player as well, and how he's coping in the team. If he's not coping too well, or there's turmoil going on, if there's family issues going on, all that kind of thing, it's just not really the right time to be talking about a new contract. So these kind of things get kind of be shelved for a little while, put in the back burner, or they pick a better time. But But no, he hasn't been offered anything to date, and I think he said as much, didn't he, a couple of weeks ago when he was on duty with Belgium. But I understand that it is something that they're looking to do, and I wouldn't want to hang my hat on it, but it wouldn't surprise me if an offer was made before the summer's finished.
Okay, coming to you, Jason, on that, does that worry you that we haven't reached out to Toby to look to offer him a new deal? Bearing in mind he's been, you'd say, the key component in that defence for now the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, and he's right in the spine of that team, so there's no doubt that he's hugely important. And I think, you look at defensive records of every team he's been in, with Ajax and Atletico Madrid and even Southampton, how strong they were defensively. So, and when you see Virgil van Dijk mentioned at 60 million quid, I think you definitely want to keep hold of Toby. But I'm quite easy about the wages and things. I mean, I see lots of figures reported that our players are on wages and they look low. But I look at it and I think, Dele Alli is with a top agent who lets him sign a 6-year contract, supposedly at 50 grand a week. Now, if these agents are as good as they are, and I'm sure Dele Alli's agent just doesn't want to do Tottenham a favour, he's there to look after his client. And if his client's allowed to sign a 6-year contract, then there has to be some huge bonuses and huge clauses that give massive incremental rises to Dele Alli, because I don't believe for the next 6 years he's on £50,000 a week, which is the reported figure. So, we may not be paying Dele Alli £200,000 a week that maybe Manchester City would be doing, but I have no doubt that Dele Alli will be significantly better off. And the fact that so many of those players signed extreme long-term contracts last season, then there has to be some serious clauses to have allowed that to happen.
Well, there is those clauses. You're right. There are a lot of them. A lot of incentive-based clauses. One of the things that Rebecca Capelhorn has implemented. She's kind of the de facto sporting director, and I think she's been coming from a bit more of a HR angle in that respect. And how do you what kind of performance incentives, financial performance incentives you put into a contract to get them to play to their maximum. And I think it's counterintuitive, I think, really, to any workforce, whether it's a football player or it's a journalist or it's a builder or whatever, to guarantee them a lot of money before they've done much work. It's more, I think, if you were to put those bonuses there. I know a lot of companies do it, don't they? The performance bonuses, that if you reach targets or you play a certain number of games, and you get more money. And Dele Alli's done brilliantly. So, and going back to Toby Alderweireld, I mean, I think it's fair to say they have reached out to him and indicated that they want to do a new deal for him. But I think it's a technical point that they haven't actually made an offer yet. Right. Like I said, there's talks. There's talks, and those talks usually start. They don't start for no reason. You indicate that you want to talk about it. So if you're the club, you make the indication to the player, yeah, we want to talk about a new deal, and you're giving them you are reaching out to them and saying that you appreciate them. But obviously, then those talks start, and the fine details, are discussed, and then an offer is made. And sometimes, you'll make an offer, and the agent or the player will turn around and say, no, it's not quite good enough, and that's when you'll hear about it being rejected and all that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean that the talks aren't going to continue, and there isn't going to be a resolution somewhere. And as I said, I don't think there's anything for anybody to worry about with Toby Alderweireld. Like Jason said, he's one of the main focal points of the team, and I don't see him going anywhere.
Yeah, he's a player that is greatly appreciated by the fans. I'm sure, like I say, Pochettino echoes how important it is to keep him. Just a question, Lyall, before what we do talk about players generally, just on the wage structure, is there a concern at Spurs that we are going to have to, at some point, break that wage structure in the future in order to look to keep our best players, to stop them wanting away from the club, or maybe, like I say, to bring players in, or to try and attract the top players, so we can try and carry on competing for the league season in, season out, and dare I say, try and go as far as we can in the Champions League? Or do you not necessarily see it like that? What's your stance on that?
Well, I think at the moment, they can't do that, and I wouldn't want to make any predictions as to when Tottenham would be in a position to be able to do that. I mean, certainly when they are in a financial position to do it, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't start competing at that level. It would be interesting to see. I mean, it would be interesting to see how many seasons in the new stadium it will take, to recoup the costs and to reassess what Tottenham's incoming is. But I would expect it to happen very quickly. I mean, this new stadium is not being built lightly. I mean, the amount of attention to detail that's gone into it is pretty astounding. You know, the number of revenue streams coming into that stadium that are non-football is big enough. You know, let alone the match day earnings that they're going to get. I mean, the NFL games, the e-sports that they're going to show there. I mean, e-sports should not be underestimated. This is something that's getting bigger all the time. Esports. I mean, it's even something that we've reported a little bit on at Sky, and you might see a little bit more of that. You know, as the more popular it gets. So, yeah, I mean, back to your question about the wage structure. I mean, at the moment, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But it'll be interesting to see what happens once that new stadium is built and they move in there, and where the players like Ali are in their contracts, and who's coming calling for them, and you know, Tottenham will make prudent decisions. They're not going to bankrupt the club, but also I wouldn't be surprised to see people's wages go up as the revenue streams go up, because they would have to, wouldn't they? I mean, it would certainly be difficult to justify to a player when you're becoming one of the more wealthier clubs, and you've got a huge new stadium that's bringing in loads of money to justify keeping them on the same money. It'd be difficult, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think that's the perfect time, guys. We're going to bring to an end part 1, and please join us for part 2, where we'll be discussing your favourite part of the show, where we'll be touching on the players that will be coming in and out in this summer's transfer window.
No one